Welcome to our webinar this morning on platform simplification, and it's really to talk about RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So I'll be kicking this off. I'm Chris, I'm the vendor manager here at CMS Distribution for Red Hat. Also on the call and presenting today, we've got Ian Hall, who's our senior solution architect that gets involved really heavily with Red Hat pre-sales queries and can help you guys out. And Max Morton, who's our business development manager, again, solely on Red Hat, and he can certainly get involved and help you guys to drive opportunities and deals and move them forwards. So this date, 30th of June 2024, make a note of it. It's really, really key and important in the world of Linux, and certainly in the world of paid and free Linux. There's three things happening on that date, which we're going to talk about in greater detail further on. The first thing is that the CentOS project is ending on the 30th of June 2024, and there are literally hundreds of customers with thousands of servers out there running CentOS, so they need to do something by that date. The second thing that's happening is that Red Hat are limiting the security fixes, so other free versions of Linux, such as Rocky and Alma, may be affected moving forwards because of this change. The third thing is that RHEL 6 is going end of life, and RHEL 7 goes into the extended lifecycle support, or ELS phase. And again, we'll talk shortly about what that means to everyone. So 30th of June 2024. This is what we're going to go through today. So I'm going to touch a little bit on what Linux is. We're going to touch on who are Red Hat, what is changing and why are things changing, the opportunity for you guys on the call today, and any promotions. So this is the second in the series of 4 webinars that we're doing on various Red Hat products. The first one you can view on our YouTube page, and we'll be putting all that out on social media, and the same with this one after this call. We'll be putting this out on social media for people to view in the future. We're going to be about 20 minutes, something like that, certainly no longer than 25 minutes. So if you got any questions, email us at the email address redhat@cmsdistribution.com, and we'll come back to you, and we'll give you that email address again at the end. So what is Linux? Linux was founded by a guy far cleverer than I am, a guy called Linus Torvalds, who, yes, he founded Linux. He also founded GitHub. It's primarily, but not exclusively, a server operating system. It's open source. So what does that mean? It means that it's free for end user customers and people in general to develop and distribute. So me personally, I could take a copy of any Linux, I could do a couple of little tweaks in it, I could market it and sell it as Chris Watson Linux. Of course, no one will buy it or use it because no one even knows what it is, and it's not supported, and it's almost certainly going to become not stable in the future, even though it's going to be taken probably from a stable product. But that does mean really that end user customers can take it, do a few tweaks that fit in with their business to make it run absolutely better on certain applications. It's a huge market. It's nearly 19 billion in 2022. It's a growing market. So Microsoft Windows is stable. Linux is growing. It's forecast to grow nearly 12% year on year up to 2026, and I'm absolutely certain it's beyond there as well. It's big, it's massive. It's 32% of the overall paid server OS market. So yes, Microsoft Windows have the lion's share of that, well in the 60% up to 70%. But Linux is big. It's out there. All of your customers, or most of your customers, will have some Linux somewhere in their estates. The fastest 500 supercomputers in the world run on Linux. Not all Red Hat Linux, of course. But when I click over to the next slide, is that Linux, Red Hat Linux is 80% of the market share, up from 70% in 2019. So yes, Linux is growing, but Red Hat are also growing. They're taking market share from other Linux vendors out there, as well as obviously from Microsoft. Huge extensive use, every single large media company, every telco, every major bank in the world, huge corporate B2B customers, have got big estates. This isn't just end user customers that are got a few little Linux servers in the corner. These are end user customers that have got heavy investment that go up to sort of millions of pounds in the Red Hat product. And why do they do it? Why do they go for Linux? Well, they've got thousands of developers, because every single person, if they want to, can help contribute to that. It's all fully supported. Red Hat say that it's the only enterprise Linux product out there. I dispute that a little bit, but the fact that it's got 80% of the market share shows that a lot of people trust Red Hat. If you're running a SQL database, it'll run quicker and more secure on Linux, on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, than it will do on Windows. And if you look at the stats, there are more Linux servers in the Microsoft Azure cloud than there are Windows servers. And again, they're not all Red Hat Enterprise Linux servers in there, but the vast majority of them are. So Red Hat have been influential contributors in a project called CentOS. Until recently, they made some announcements and some changes to the whole CentOS project. So, Ian, do you just want to talk us through that and move on and talk specifically about this CentOS piece?
Yeah, not a problem. So let's talk about what's changing. Is Red Hat started the CentOS project to aid in the development of Red Hat, the RHEL in particular. It used to sit downstream. What that basically means is that it would sit beyond where production of RHEL was. And so it was in essence a copy of RHEL with extra configurations, changes as the development cycle went on. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever we want to look at it, it became so good that it was often considered to be called free RHEL. And against really what you should have been doing, people were using it in production environments. Development software and OSs shouldn't really be used in production environments because you've got no support and integrity of the data. And if you were to ever be checked out by any financial regulators or anything like that about your data, you would get hit very hard. So it really shouldn't have been in production environments. The change that's coming now is that CentOS is going to what's called CentOS Stream, and it's going from being downstream to upstream. So it is now going to sit between the innovation of Fedora, so all the fancy changes that will come in, and it's going to sit between that and the stability of production RHEL. So it's kind of going to be a halfway house between the two. But with that same result is neither of them are production environment software, either CentOS or CentOS Stream. They're just kind of development second environment softwares. With this, CentOS 07 is going end of life. That's going on the 30th of June, the date that we keep talking about there. And then CentOS Stream is currently and future replacing it as well. Okay. So how does this affect other things? Well, with CentOS, you had some branches of it, copies in essence. You had Alma Linux and Rocky Linux. They were in essence branches off from CentOS, and they were basically working very much in the original ethos of what CentOS was designed for. However, with the changes of what Red Hat are doing, is they are no longer going to be getting the core security patches from RHEL itself. That support is stopping. That means that these two Linuxes and any other free distros are going to be affected by this, and that those teams will need to now maintain and develop their own security patches. So whilst people may have moved from CentOS to Alma or Rocky, they now have to consider the fact of, are these secure environments? So even when they probably shouldn't be using them in production in the first place, should they really not be using them in production environments again? Security is the most important thing with data above anything else. And that's the discussions that should be had and the opportunities that should be had. And again, 30th of June. So what else is changing? RHEL 6 is going full end of maintenance. RHEL 7 is going into its ELS phase. So that's similar to what you see with, say, other operating systems, Windows, where it's come to EOL, but you can buy an extended life aspect support of it, and that's going for 4 years. And it's a paid-for service on top of the actual support contract as well, the standard subscription. So it's an additional thing, very similar to other things. And again, 30th of June, this is all kicking into effect. So the opportunities, what do these changes give? Obviously, these are quite big changes for the community, and the community, obviously, the Alma and Rocky are obvious results of the community. But from yourselves, what does that give you? Well, the benefit of where we were with CentOS previously, with it being a downstream, it was in fact a clone of RHEL, therefore. And so therefore, for moving people from CentOS to RHEL, it's really quite simple because the core data is the same and the core configurations are the same. And there's a convert to RHEL tool to make this really, really easy. So start with the discussions about, primary environments shouldn't be using unsupported operating systems because of data integrity and all those things. And then you can talk about nice and easy. It's easy to convert. Going to RHEL, stable, fast, secure. The security patches are going through as we discussed. That means that you've got a guarantee of the security of that data and that RHEL themselves will be supporting this. Enterprise grade support that I just touched on there. Quite frankly, if anyone's moving from CentOS, the easiest, safest, and most professional choice is to move from CentOS to RHEL. Makes it nice and simple. Okay, I'm going to pass on to Max now.
Perfect, thank you, Ian. So it presents obviously a bit of an opportunity to spoken about what the situation is and what the challenges that users might face. I suppose that leads on to what opportunity there is to do something about it and to help customers. So before we get into that properly, do they have alternatives? So yeah, I mean, they do, right? You can, if you're a user of CentOS, you can continue to use CentOS. So for, let's say, for argument's sake, using CentOS 7, it's not as if your ability to continue using that as an operating system is just going to end on the day. But the community support in the form of bug fixes and to some extent security patches that were or still are happening won't any longer, right? So it'll be on the user to essentially fork CentOS further and apply their own support essentially, right? And so if you consider that it wasn't, as Ian kind of alluded to, it's not really ideal to be using a like a community supported operating system in production. Certainly not for enterprises where there might be a duty of care to customer data and business continuity and what have you. That kind of intensifies where now it's the user self-supporting. So there's quite a lot of risk associated with continuing to use CentOS. But I mean, it may be that the case that it's fine if it's in a development environment. But even there, right, if you're developing on something that you eventually are going to need to move off, there's quite a bit of there's something to consider there. Similarly, something that quite a lot of users have already done could move to other RHEL clones like Rocky or Alma. Again, as Ian mentioned, there's a similar set of concerns that you have to look at, which is that given the most recent changes and the lack of access to the RHEL source code, Rocky and Alma and the people that curate them have to consider how they're going to keep them like for like with RHEL in terms of security, patching, bug fixing, etc. So then if you're a user, you kind of just inherit the same problems that they have, and so it's still kind of kicking the can further down the road. You've obviously got other enterprise supported and fully enterprise Linux offerings, SUSE and I think Oracle, probably the foremost that come to mind. Obviously fantastic products as well, but not in the same vein, but they are, sorry, so not in the same vein insofar as they're not RHEL clones, but they are very much similar to RHEL. And I think it's quite fair to say they're not, if you think about the adoption stats and usage stats that Chris mentioned, they're not the foremost enterprise Linux option that obviously RHEL is. So it may be that further down the line, you're still essentially going to be considering a move to RHEL. And so that brings on to the last point, which is that, there's certain sets of risks here. One's with the first 2 points there on CentOS, Rocky and Alma as examples around security and stability and being up to date. But then to include SUSE, Oracle, and other paid Linux offerings, there's potentially quite a lot of complexity in migrating and moving across either from where you are today or where a customer is today to those options or to RHEL in the future. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is these alternatives may be for many users a quick fix or a temporary fix. So it's quite good to have conversations with customers or potential customers around skipping all that and looking at a move to RHEL now. So yeah, thanks, Chris. How can you start those conversations? It's nice and straight. forward, right? You don't need to be an expert. So do you have any CentOS servers in your estate? CentOS 7, we don't have data on the adoption of CentOS 7, but it's quite well known that that's vast. We do, or have been told by Red Hat, that RHEL 7, which is the the kind of the like for like with CentOS 7, or historically was, huge, like really widely used. So we know there's a lot of CentOS out there. So chances are, be it an SME or an enterprise you're speaking to, there's going to be usage of CentOS somewhere. And this just goes back to the fact that in the past it was absolutely like for like with RHEL, so it would benefit from all the brilliant features, functionality, stability, and security that you get with RHEL. So people have been adopting and using CentOS for years. So there's a lot of it out there. And it's straightforward as asking if they've got CentOS in their estate. Equally, you can ask if they're running any other free Linux distributions or RHEL clones. So you'll probably find long-time users of CentOS, many of them moved to Rocky and Alma in the last couple of years. And as we've sort of gone through in the previous slide, kind of leads you on to the same conversation about the challenges that they are necessarily going to face going forward, particularly from the 30th of June next year. You might also have customers are Red Hat customers, they're using RHEL, or you don't, and you ask and you find out that they are. And then to the third slide, or one of the points that Ian mentioned about the extended life cycle phase of RHEL 6. So if it turns out that you've got a user of RHEL 6 or RHEL 7, then they've got considerations there about maybe moving up to upgrading to RHEL 8 or 9, or just having a conversation about and making them aware of the fact that either with RHEL 6, ELS is going to end, and that completely ends any form of support that Red Hat offer for RHEL 6. Or if they're on RHEL 7, then they're going to need to they're going to need to purchase ELS subscriptions, usually about 50% extra the cost of the normal Red Hat subscription. So it's a case of making them aware you're going to be paying more. Do you want to be paying more, or do you want to consider, moving on to a version of RHEL which is in either production or full, current maintenance support? So to kind of take that one step further, obviously we're talking about in theory moving people from free to paid, slightly painful journey, slightly painful conversation to have in some cases. There are some promotions available from Red Hat. So there's one that they've had for a little while, but perhaps you might not have heard of, called Revolutionize. Now this was born, at the moment, what this is was born out of two kind of disparate promotions. One to reactivate lapsed customers or bring new customers on board, and another to incentivize moving primarily from CentOS over to RHEL. Straightforward enough, 3 years for the price of 2, or a third off the value of 1 year. Quite a lot more value to be had in paying for 2 years and getting 3, but then also, getting someone sort of into the right mindset and committed to a contract with Red Hat, and on board with the story, as it were. You also then got, within those 3 years, time to talk about doing their migration, for example. That's not necessarily going to happen overnight, particularly if they've got a large estate or variety of workloads running on CentOS or whatever other RHEL clone they're using. But also then that's a great land and expand opportunity to talk about the Red Hat portfolio at large. So I think it makes quite a lot of sense. And then finally, deal reg applies here, right? So if you are talking to a customer and you find one of these opportunities, speak to us and we can make sure you're aware of how it is that Red Hat's deal registration process works. It's called Opportunity Reward Program, ORP. Probably some may have heard of it and others not, but yeah, you can deal reg, and we can kind of do a bit of education on how to get deal regs in place. So yeah, look, to kind of bookend, started with this date and it's good to finish with it. It is a flashpoint, but it's not, I suppose it's not all doom and gloom, right? It's not as if it's the end of the world in a day if a move hasn't been made or conversations haven't come to fruition and people haven't committed to what their plans are around moving from an older version of RHEL or from an unsupported RHEL clone. Again, probably quite a lot of us are familiar with having these kind of conversations about Windows Server and desktop. We know what it's like trying to, you don't want to alarm people, but there is a degree of urgency here. So it's good to have these conversations going now. It doesn't have to be anything pushy. It doesn't have to even really involve pricing and all the other things we mentioned. It's more to make, first of all, to make people aware. And also I think it's worth ending by saying, in many cases, customers are aware. They might have been involved in some dialogues, particularly like Linux users and Linux enthusiasts. They've already got an opinion about this, but many of them are going to be making these decisions, right? They're happening already. They're already thinking, right, well, if we have to pay, or if we need something that's now paid for, okay, are we already budgeting for it? Are we already considering our options? Are we already thinking about how we do migration and whatnot? So it's simply a case in, or simply the case in some circumstances that you're capturing a conversation that's already going on, become the trusted advisor to help them make these decisions, take these decisions, and implement whatever it is that they're going to be doing. So it's good to start these conversations now. This is the date that you want to be looking to and kind of impressing upon them, is that's when, you know, it'll kind of all switch over. But as I say, it's nothing too panicky. So yeah, and I think Chris mentioned before, so any queries, anything at all, totally unrelated today necessarily, but just Red Hat relevant, ping us at redhat@cmsdistribution.com. So we've all got visibility of that. If you have my details, you have Chris's or Ian's, obviously feel free to call us or email us directly, that's fine. But your best bet is to email us there, and, you know, we'll be happy to help. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, everyone. Chris, Ian, thanks for doing this. I think we've got a couple of questions. So Chris, do you want to, I think you're presenting if you want to take them.
Yes, so a couple of questions in from Steve Bird, actually. So that's good news, because it means that it was going live and feeding out. So thank you for that, Steve. What workloads are typical to be found running on CentOS, please? Any trends? I don't know.
Trends of what's running on CentOS. Sorry, I'll pick that up, but Ian, you might know better than I.
No, you go.
I don't think there are any typical workloads or any trends. So CentOS has binary compatibility, I think is the correct term, with RHEL, and has done for years, right? So it's more or less anything that people would be running on RHEL, you'll find it on CentOS. So there's probably a bit of a crappy answer, but the kind of what you want to think of is it's broad. It's broadly adopted. Broad in terms of the verticals and the customer types and sizes that use it, but then also broad in terms of what it can be used for. It's just a clone of RHEL, and Red Hat have always been about interoperability and an awful lot of certification and strong relationships with other ISVs and hardware vendors. So I suppose no to trends, and I can't really tell you if there's typical workloads. It would be like saying what's a typical Linux workload is probably the answer. And then I see, yeah, that's okay. I hope that helped a little bit. But then the other question, main persona or role of these Linux enthusiasts. Okay, so certainly within within infrastructure teams. So what we've just seen recently in a few cases, you'll have, it's probably not too difficult, right? There'll be people that will have the role Linux engineer, senior Linux engineer, but also these days, people that are working in DevOps teams or DevSecOps teams quite often come from a Linux background. Not always the case by any means, right? But it is the case that a lot more cloud native applications and private cloud architects or people that work with things that are cloud native have a Linux background. Why? Because various reasons, which I could bore you with, but I won't. Many of the more cutting edge applications are developed on Linux these days, partly because of the open source nature of it, right? Because of the easy access to Linux operate as an operating system, and then other open source things being developed on top of Linux. So yeah, I think people with Linux in their title, they do exist. That's a nice place to start. They're not necessarily decision makers, but they certainly have an opinion and influence on what a business will do with their Linux usage going forward. And then also to some extent, well, clearly infrastructure managers, which are their bosses, but then also to some extent, people with cloud in their title, people with DevOps in their title. It's quite often the case.
Yeah, a good example of where you may see CentOS to be is in educational environments, where because of the, as you mentioned about the binary compatibility, basically being free RHEL, the copy of RHEL, it meant they kind of got all the good bits without any of the subscription infrastructure that goes with RHEL. That sounds great until they start to look into the most important thing they've got is all the data of their students that they need to secure that. And that's when it gets a little bit more flaky, because you don't have that full security. And going forwards, you're not going to have that with the Red Hat subscription. So IT managers within that environment are a good point to go with as well, because they're the people that probably use it, and almost from the enthusiast we're using it. Why? Because, well, I know how to work with it and it's great, so I can configure it and secure it. But they're kind of one place to go for where we need to both, not just from a RHEL perspective, but from what they should be doing correctly, is getting them off CentOS and onto a subscription based supported system where they've got that technical and security basis to it. So that's one good target to go for as well.
Cool. And just to add to the first question, Steve, and obviously everyone else that's on the call, there's a case study that was released actually by Salesforce, the online database and CRM system company. They recently migrated 200,000 servers from CentOS 7 over to RHEL 9. 200,000. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. So they were running their whole Salesforce system on CentOS. They knew that it was stable and secure, and okay, they didn't get the support that you get with a full RHEL subscription on that. They've obviously evaluated options. They've chosen to go for a paid Red Hat subscription. If you read the case study, and we'll certainly send it out to everyone that's joined on this call, they claim that they've saved money by doing it because CentOS 7 is nearly 10 years old, and RHEL 9 is obviously a lot newer, so it's more secure. There's a lot more WYSI features in there. It doesn't take as many people to help manage it. CentOS, because there is no support, it takes quite a lot of management, and people's time, and time costs money, right? And people cost money. So yeah, they claim they save money by buying a RHEL subscription instead of using something that's technically free. So it's past now. I said that I'd be no longer than half an hour. So thank you very much for your time. Any more questions, anything you want us to know about it, email in. Thanks, Steve, for your questions. Thanks, Ian, Max, and hope you all have a good day. Cheers.